I think what would be super great is if people ask themselves, where's my poop and pee going? Is it being gainfully employed somewhere? Applied to like some composting facility that's creating a type of organic biosolid? Or is it being pushed into the nearest water body?
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. This is Sarah Nahar, née Thompson, she, her. And Sarah is a nonviolent action trainer and interspiritual theologian. Now as a PhD candidate in Syracuse, New York, which is, oh no, I didn't practice this word. Can you pronounce the traditional land?
Yeah. So Syracuse sits on Onondaga Nation, which is the capital of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and that's the original Confederacy, not the Southern one. And it's a group of indigenous nations that came together a long time ago to become a league of peacemaking nations.
Okay, thank you. Sarah focuses on ecological regeneration, community cultivation, and spiritual activism. And when I reached out to Sarah and asked what she wanted to talk about, I think it was probably one of my favorite answers. She just emailed back, shit, I want to talk about shit, and then sent links for me to check out. And I was like, yes, this is perfect. And she sent me a really excellent article that she wrote that we'll be talking a lot about today. And Sarah's also going to be braiding her hair while we talk, which is great. So today we're going to be talking about shit. And it was there was a little bit of irony, or it was interesting because right when I was about to get on Zoom, when I was all prepared and ready to go, I was like, do I really have to go to the bathroom right now? Do I really have to poop? Like, seriously, like right before I was about to start. And so it was just like, it was very appropriate to this podcast. And so I was like,
excellent.
I was like on the toilet, like emailing Sarah, like, just give me 1 second, I'll be right there. So, it's natural. It's part of our lives. I grew up, my mom's a nurse, my dad's a pastor, but like bodily functions was never really like taboo or hush hush. That was like not like, we were just open about it. I feel like there's like, there's different levels.
Wonderful.
Like there's like taboo or silence around bodily functions, or like they call it something that it's not, like, I don't know, doo-doo or something. And then there's like openness, honesty, and then there's like crass like jokes about poop all the time. And that was my spouse's family. They love a good poop joke. Well, I'm curious how in your family, this isn't, getting into our questions yet, but how did you talk about poop growing up in your family?
Yeah, we talked a lot about like bowel movements when I was younger. We had to say like the whole word. So that was very interesting when I would go over to other people's houses and they're like, what do you mean? Do you have to poop? And I didn't know that word yet.
Oh.
I'm not sure. I need to have a bowel movement. Where do I go? So I felt like extra proper. That was like a lot of my childhood. But yes, and thank you. Yes, I'm gonna unbraid my hair now because it's there's a lot going on in life, and I was like, oh great, it's a podcast, so it won't be visible. But surprise, you get to also have the video recording for those of you who are more visual learners. That's awesome. I'm back here in Elkhart, Goshen today, which is traditional Potawatomi land, but spend a lot of time in Syracuse, New York now. But whenever I come home, I get my hair braided by Belinda Tunstall, is my favorite person who's been braiding my hair since I was in 2nd grade.
Aww.
So I'm pulling it down so I can retwist it, and then she'll braid it up again. So I'm in between things or throughout the day is when I have a chance to get it done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
so it's good to be here with you and good to talk about the real stuff of life.
Yes, definitely. And before we dive in, because I'm so ready to talk about all things defecatory justice, which is an excellent phrase. I am glad that that is in my vocabulary now. I'm curious what you're drinking. So I try to like kind of align my mugs with whatever we're talking about, and I was like, I have no mug that has anything to do with poop. But I was like, okay, I have a brown mug, and if you like squint and like, or just like close your eyes and picture the poop emoji, then you know you've got it. So, and I have my black.
That's phenomenal. Great.
So yeah, it's
Awesome.
actually quite
Cool.
a beautiful mug. It's brown and it's got like stripes. And anyway, so what do you have today?
Yeah, that looks actually kind of, it kind of fades to yellow too, because even though I do focus on what is happening on the defecation end of our elimination, also urination is really important to pay attention to and to understand. The substances are actually quite different. And so the toilets of the future will have source point separation. So we'll be kind of urinating and defecating into two different kind of slots so that the materials can be processed differently. So that's what's coming up. Over here, I've got two things. One is just pure water, the elixir of life. And it also is a water bottle, which has Stir Up Peace, which is a series of videos from Mennonite Mission Network. And they are 9 videos related to nonviolent direct action and assisting people in figuring out how to be most present to the shit that's showing up right now in our global system, and to do so in a way that really composts it and moves it through our system so that the earth can digest it instead of just bouncing around and becoming toxic, which is the heart of what we'll talk about in terms of the connections between dealing with our shit literally and metaphorically. So pure water with the Stir Up Peace sticker. And also just on the side, I almost broke into the pregnancy tea. That's also, I'm getting my hair braided and unbraided too. Like, time is so short when one is pregnant. So you just got to multitask like something serious. And I heard after the baby comes too, got to keep it moving. So yeah, that's what's up today.
Hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast, so I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad. Well, great. And as usual on our podcast, we start by defining terms. You have this phrase, defecatory justice. I don't think we need to define shit, unless you think it's important to. But I would.
The only thing I'll say about shit is that although it's a word in English that sometimes offends people, it's the closest to a very neutral word that we have. Shit in its kind of old English roots traces all the way back to the word to divide or to separate. It's actually the same root as the word science. So science is the kind of the process of separation of things into categories. And really all that's happening when we shit is there is a separation of what was us to the now what we understand to be the not us anymore. Even though of course everything is one thing on this living, breathing planet. As you mentioned before, people use a lot of euphemisms to talk about the nutrients that come out of our body. And one of the most damaging euphemisms is the word waste, because indeed the substance is nutrient rich, and it is waste is a label. it's a verb, really. You can waste something, lay waste to something. But when you make that verb into a noun and kind of deprive that noun of its essential characteristics, it is then in danger of being wasted. So basically, I mean, one of my theses is like, why do we treat shit like shit? Terribly in that sense, right? Or poorly. And who is treated like shit in our society? And what places are treated like shit? And how might, by redeeming shit itself, we reimagine who we are in the world, and for those people who are religious, how we live out our faiths in the world. So that's the word I would say on shit. It's really important to have a neutral word to talk about what comes out. That way we can actually tackle the immense issues that we have, as we do have a sanitation crisis on this planet. So that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's so true. I don't typically think of poop or feces as nutrient dense, but yet I save like I have chickens. And so when I clean out their coop, I put it on the compost pile because it will feed the compost. But somehow there's then that I wonder if it's like the human animal separation in my mind. Even though as humans, we are animals, that somehow the idea of human feces as that is nutrients, yeah, there's a gap there. And it seems like you're trying to close that gap, which is amazing.
We call it closing the poop loop.
Closing the poop loop. I love it. That's amazing.
Oh, good. You wanted me to define defecatory justice. Yeah. So this is a term that came through me to help us think about where what comes out of our body is going. Often it's considered to go away, but there's no such place as away. There's nowhere called away land. It's all going somewhere. And so who are the beings, the people, animals, insects, ecosystems, and water bodies onto which it's going? And what kind of well-being or life or justice do they have? When integrated well, when the poop loop is closed, nutrients can be handled effectively and safely. And if not, then there's like a breach in defecatory justice in which people are being piled on. And literally other people's shit is being dumped on them. And this threatens ecosystems. It has really negative climate impacts. And also the question of defecatory justice stretches into who has access to dignified sanitation. Well, already around the world, 1.3 billion people don't have access to a porta potty, to a box, to a toilet. And so they do open defecation in areas where pathogens can spread, because poop does carry pathogens, and when not contained, it can be very dangerous, and it is quite dangerous. In fact, because of the insects and flies that pick up the pathogens and then interact with food, it creates a lot of food, or when the poop hits water, then when people drink that water, it creates a lot of diarrhea, and then the intestines close in order to protect the body, and then there's malnutrition, and a lot of people die, particularly children. So defecatory justice says, why do we live in a world where some poop and pee in fresh water and others are looking for dignified places to use a restroom? So it works with racial justice and ecological justice. It flows with some of those other justice paradigms as well. But especially as we think about food justice, it doesn't let us get away with only thinking about the incoming to our bodies moment, but also the fact that we as humans are producers, not only end consumers. So it's working on that end.
Yeah. And I'm curious when or how you first started learning about the importance of sanitation and how it relates to the well-being of humanity, the environment. Like what got you into this topic?
Cool. I was part of an ecological, theological carnival called the Carnival Day Resistance. And we rode around on bicycles to different cities So, well, once a year, and we perform stories of how the elements of earth and air and water and fire spoke through the biblical text to this ecological moment. And while doing that, we lived in such a way that aligned with our values. And so we had a fossil fuel free kitchen, and our sound system for the productions of these arts and culture and theological presentations were all run by bicycles with generators on the back to create our own electricity. And we lived in tents, and also we had composting toilets. And so the first time that I really ran into compost toilet, I was like, oh, no, that's not for me. I am disgusted. But over the course of a month, using that experience, and then also at this time it was in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is traditional Monacan land. We had a chance to go to the new community project where they were processing human manure there very well and healthfully, and so we got to see how what we produced and what came out of us, even if it was refuse for us, could go into nurturing new flowers and gardens. So it was a really meaningful experience. And when I saw how it could be integrated at the new in human manure, I realized I never wanted to poop in fresh water again. And so thus began my quest and my lifelong goal of not having to poop in fresh water. And it is cool, when people put in composting toilets like one by one or in their households. But what I work on and what we need a lot of right now is collective action and systemic intervention so that we can impact at regional or watershed scales what is happening. And so that's why I decided to go into it in terms of a PhD and to think about systemically how might we change not only our infrastructure, but also our worldview as it relates to who we are, what we do. And that's why it's a pastoral concern. Because when we're talking about worldview shift or values change for survival, that requires pastoral skills as well as prophetic to help people make the leap between where we are now and where we need to be. In this case, we still have elders and people from all over the world who have alternative ideas to how we deal with our poop and our pee. Just a matter of listening to them and making sure that their voices are at the forefront.
Along those lines, how does this passion and fight for justice relate to your sense of spirituality and discipleship? You went to Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, same seminary I did. And you just said it's pastoral. Do you want to dig into that a little bit more?
So I believe that divine love and fusion and alignment can show up in every aspect of our life. And that is not limited to everything outside of the bathroom. And so the sense that part of our bodies are dirty or unacceptable is not really so divine. I looked at 1 Corinthians 12 through 26 in the Christian scriptures, and that is all about how the different parts of the body work together and how they need one another. Sometimes those that are considered less honorable, we give them greater honor, and what's considered weaker are actually indispensable. And that works on both the level of the body itself, but also in society, and how we super need all of each other to relate. So if we are ignoring certain aspects of our lives or our ethics, it's important to really call in and begin to integrate every part of our life so it can be for the glory of God, I would say. And not only that, but there are like theologians have been thinking about the body for a long time and how the different parts relate. And you can get a lot of health information, frankly, from your stool. You can know what how hard it is, how soft it is, what color it is. It can tell you a lot about your stress level, what you're eating, how your body's processing things, and all that matters when we're thinking about spiritual life and health. In Judaism, there's a prayer that is recited upon leaving the bathroom. It's called the Asher Yatzar, and it is all about giving gratitude to the one who makes all flesh and it heals. And it just recognizes that if a tube that was open was supposed to be closed. And if a tube that was closed was supposed to be open, if anything was ruptured or broken, if any hollow or boundary was not together, then the praying person could not stand before God's glorious throne and praise God's name, even for an hour. So it just recognizes the importance of how all the aspects of the body work together, and that nothing is lost on the breath of God, as the hymn says, and that also that there is a wondrous aspect of every part of the body. And so let's preach about it all. But we often hear stories about the great feast and all these times of eating, but what happened afterwards, right? And furthermore, in terms of speaking to the impacts for our ethics, like a lot of people are dying as a result of the sanitation crisis and a result of not having clean water. And for people whose faith helps them care about issues of life and death, war and peace, and things of that nature, then we have to talk about the sanitation crisis, because the numbers are very high in terms of who is dying and why. And these are actually solvable issues and solvable problems in terms of infrastructure, but it really won't be unless there's a worldview shift that honors the land, the waters, the people, and kind of pushes back on needing to do things in a very colonial, Eurocentric way in terms of the toilet, because using that much fresh water, because the toilet uses many, many gallons of water each day. It's the most guzzling household appliance. And so, it's kind of tough to know that some of our daily actions are perpetuating more inequality and cavalier use of resources, but we have to become made aware of that.
Right.
If we want to be faithful.
Yeah. And, if you're coming from a peace tradition perspective, Anabaptism is traditionally, or is in the peace tradition, is what I'm trying to say. And, we focus on war. Growing up, there was a lot of focus on interpersonal violence. What would you do if someone broke into your home? But there's so many other ways of being violent or perpetuating violence. And I hadn't thought about how we handle waste as potential violence until I read your article. And in your article, you quote a 2006 Human Development Report, which stated that there were 1.8 million child deaths each year related to clean water and sanitation. And I'm quoting here, it says, "No act of terrorism generates economic devastation on the scale of the crisis in water and sanitation." So if we're talking peace and nonviolent action, nonviolent resistance, you want to talk more about how this is something that we need to prioritize?
Yeah, and I like to thank Rose George in her book, The Unmentionable World of Human Waste and Why It Matters, for that quote and those stats. And yes, what I would say is working on the toilets and sewers and stuff, much of which is underground for those of us in the global north, is what I like to call revolution from the bottom up. Really, it's not something that's going to be done with one policy change or project proposal. Rather, it's a journey of discipleship as we think about our relationship to the more than human siblings that we have.
Yeah, thank you for that. And in your article, you made it clear that cutting and pasting like a Western sanitization system in other places of the world is ineffective. And I had heard my friend works with water sanitization, and I think he was telling me about how they were trying to, it was supposed to be this like good effort of like putting toilets in villages in India, and how they, put all this effort into it. It's supposed to be such a great project, and then they never use the toilets. And yeah, so I'm curious, in your mind, what are effective and practical solutions to this crisis, and who do we need to go to so that these solutions are sustainable?
Cool. Well, as with any justice work, we start with those who are the most impacted by the situation and work together with them on thinking about how changes may be made towards goals that they have. So everyone for their community has a goal of health and well-being. And so if there's knowledge that can support that, then people can make educated decisions about that. Part of that debacle that you heard about in India has a lot to do with, top-down initiatives that make it difficult for a community to decide what types of toilets and locations and or how to incorporate their traditional open defecation processes into the landscape now. So part of the issue is that, and there's a lot of open defecation all over India, but before the British came, there were multi-layered levels of massive jungle spaces. And so to be able to take your morning walk and to defecate and to come back resulted in the substance you left there being able to reintegrate into the ecosystem without harm. When the British came and chopped down those forests and monocrop pine trees, all of a sudden now open defecation is a problem because it doesn't reintegrate in the same way. Right. So we actually have to look at our entire system and how it's set up, that what is preventing people from pooping in peace. So learning greater context will be helpful. And we know at the same time we have to figure out, given what we're dealing with now, how might we make shifts that work? But it's tough.
Yeah. So I asked this question to everyone that comes on the show, but what would you say if someone told you that you were a bad Mennonite Christian, however you identify, or maybe inappropriate, maybe would be more fitting to this word, or that it was offensive because of your passion for shit or defecatory justice? How would you respond?
Yeah, well, I have been told that. And that's what people are challenged by, dealing with what is uncomfortable to them. But, as a mixed child, someone coming from two racial categories, someone who is very good at sports and not that traditional to their gender and things of that nature, I'm no stranger to being inappropriate. This is what God has called me to do for some reason. I don't know why. God hold me with this, but I must honor that and must work together. The other thing, is I get so many great responses because people, like, everyone's got their own poop story. Everyone's got stories of either shame or difficulty or questions or hilarity that we can all share because it's such a deeply universal experience. There are people who do use like colon bags, so there's a few like that, but most people poop from their butts. And it's like something we all do and don't really talk about as much compared to other things that we all do. And so mostly the reception has been really great, and people are able to integrate it into broader aspects of their lives. But people who are differently abled, people who are elders, where this conversation is actually more front and center for them than they may have imagined otherwise, or for people who are beginning to figure out how to potty train toddlers and are thinking carefully about that process and what they want to train a young one into. For those folks, it's actually kind of a really valuable time. But yes, I think that when people say that, I get a little bit sad because it's a missed opportunity for how the hilarious and wild and fun God we serve and world we live on can help us stay connected to our whole beings and receive the invitation to live well and live fully.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I ask that question almost every single time. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know, maybe like I don't need to ask that question, but people always have different amazing answers to that question. So I'm going to keep asking it. But as you were talking about like the hilarity and how the universality of pooping, it reminded me of my nephew. For a while when he was potty trained, he went through this phase where he would name his poops. Like he would be like, oh, this one is airplane, because it like looked like an airplane to him or something. Or like he would just like name And it was always like a shape. It was always like what he thought the poop looked like. And I think that that's so funny. I love that. Like, innocent honesty. But yeah.
It's wonderful.
Well, I am incredibly grateful for the work that you do. I have learned so much in reading your article. Is that an article that I could paste like a link to under the podcast? Okay, great. And if you have any other resources, you'll have to send them my way so I can put them links under the podcast. But do you have any final words about the work you do or any advice for someone who wants to get into this field?
Yeah, so I think what would be super great is if people ask themselves, where's my poop and pee going? Is it being gainfully employed somewhere, applied to like some composting facility that's creating a type of organic biosolid? Or is it being pushed into the nearest water body? Up here where we both are, we have a terrible issue with combined sewer overflows. And that is when during heavy rainstorms, where the refuse would normally go is overwhelmed. And so then it goes directly into the river. And we've had a lot of rain this summer. That means a lot of CSOs. And so the issues of diarrhea and the issues of poor sanitation are not just issues of the global south, but they are issues for each of us in all of our communities. And so figuring out where your poop and pee go, and if you don't like the answer, getting together with others to put pressure on policymakers to ask questions about how we might transform our collective system. Right now, if not 50 years ago, was a great time to make the transitions from large pipes in the ground, moving things far away from people, towards looking at what experiments in closed loop systems can happen. In many places, it's illegal to have a composting toilet within the city limits. And so it's tough for people to like make kind of a particular transition or something. But through collective pressure and through working together with research institutions in the area, or just getting it on the civic conversation, therein lies the possibilities for more structural transformation. And that's similar with working on issues as well of violence that you mentioned. It's not just interpersonal, but it's a way of figuring out how to team up together with others to adjust structurally. But of course, if possible, I encourage folks to go yellow mellow, brown down, reduce the amount of flushes that we use. And if you've got a yard you can pee in, please do. And if nothing else, just when you jiggle the handle, say thank you. Say thank you to your body for being able to eliminate, and say thank you to all the invisible systems and people that are working to help keep you healthy, and just know that there are other ways that can be done if we are determined and more creative. And we will have to be if we want to see the survival of complex life forms on this planet. And I know that so many of us do, and I would love living on planet Earth. So just, when you jiggle the handle each day, if you're regular, just say thank you.
Yeah. I love the little cues throughout my day for like gratitude or and so I'm gonna have to add that, like every time I jiggle the handle. My this is unrelated, but my friend used to do like calf raises every time she would brush her teeth, and it's called like habit stacking. And I'm like,
yes, that's so great.
Yeah, relate that.
I do squats, but I can lift some calf raises. That's great.
Perfect. I love it. You can get fit and be grateful at the same time.
Yeah. Oh yes. I mean, it's one and the same. It's the way that a body kind of responds to the opportunity of being alive. So it's really super cool.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Sarah. This is, oh man, I just appreciate all this. I am learning so much. And would it be okay if I end this podcast episode with a blessing to bless you,
yes,
viewers and listeners? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sarah, and all you viewers and listeners, may you go from this space with a greater awareness of that there is no way, and with a sense of curiosity to where does my poop and pee, etc. go. May you be inspired to help close the poop loop. And may you be filled with gratitude for all that goes into sanitation. And may you have a fire in your belly, in your core, for defecatory justice and the rest. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that blessing. The word in Greek for compassion is really similar to the word for guts. And so it's all about the sense of like the bowels of compassion. Can we get them moving and keep them moving?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I read that in your article and I thought that was so neat. Like when it would say that Jesus was moved with compassion. I actually just preached on that. Moved in his bowels and his guts, and like connecting that to like to our, I almost said waste. I'm glad you said that, because now I don't want to use that.
I noticed it slipped up once, but we're getting it little by little by little. It's okay. I just like winked at you. No, it's okay. It's okay. This is the process. Look at you doing it already. I love it. I mean, that's it. You're like, wait, there it was again.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I know it's beautiful to catch it. Right. I wonder if it was actually like, Jesus was moved with compassion. Did they actually just mean that Jesus went to go take a poop? He was so moved by what he saw, reset himself, and then came back to speak with that crowd because he had compassion on them because they were like a sheep without a shepherd.
Ooh,
right.
Yes.
And he's like, that. They need something to eat. Y'all give them something to eat. Like we all want to be moved by our bowels of compassion.
It's the cycle, he had to be moved in his bowels so that he could like feed others. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, see, there's so many sermons on this. Somewhere on Facebook too is a sermon of me preaching at Community Midnight Church about on July 4 about alternative allegiance and some of this content. So that is also available. I can try to send you all sorts of various links, but I'm a PhD student, so there could be a whole bibliography coming.
Oh, yes, I would love that. And I'd love to have you at my church, because I was like, if I preach on poop now, it's all due to Sarah. Oh, or I could have you come and preach. You have this wealth of knowledge about this subject. And also, I just want to say I really appreciate like all your metaphors that you use, like within like justice of like being constipated, and like there's not this sense of flow. And I just think it's really it's profound. Who knew that would be so profound? So
somebody knew. Yeah. Somebody somewhere, before it got to be too cerebral. Somebody knew.
Oh, yes. Oh my God.
Awesome. Well, good to see you twice in 1 week. Take care then.
All right.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.